viewing biohacking from an economics perspective. And so she came up with the idea of health return on investment. So it's the term that she will describe in more detail. And she has developed the Biohacking Staircase. So the very first talk that she gave was on oxygen and air, and then one last term which was on sleep, and today will be about food and nutrition. So I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting talk. I've been looking forward to this. Hopefully you will be able to come in again to talk about the next step in the Biohacking Staircase as well. And also, just before we start, just wanted to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Going Live. So this is their website. I recommend you check it out. They post articles, anything longevity related. So things from the microbiome to stem cells, gene therapy, and they have experts that basically go ahead and check out the newest developments in longevity research. And so, yeah, you can find it on their website. All right, so let's go ahead with biohacking on the body, the diet and nutrition edition.
Thank you.
Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you to our sponsors. Here, a little bit about me. I was diagnosed with cancer when I was 20 and became a biohacker because I realized if I don't have my health, I have nothing. Since then, I worked at the most exclusive longevity clinics in the UK. I now biohack for a 3-time unicorn founder, and my project I'm working on right now is with the Enhanced Games, which is the Olympics on steroids where anything goes. That will be hosted now in Las Vegas end of this month. But I wasn't always working with like the 0.1%. In the past, I was in financial advice and financial services. And what I realized there is that over like 90% of all the services are targeted at that 1% of the population. And I've seen that the same thing is happening in longevity and biohacking, and I want to change that. Now, when you work with people, regardless of how much wealth they have, we all have a limited amount of money and limited amount of time. So in order to optimize our health return on investment, we need to look at 2 main things, the 2 main pillars, which is time we spend and how much money we're investing. The problem is that we're getting overwhelmed with all these different things that we could be doing, should be doing, and you don't know where to start, and that's overwhelming, and then you end up, focusing on the wrong things. So what I've realized that I needed to do to help my clients is to, how can I simplify this in order to ensure that I'm following the Pareto rule? So 80% output for 20% effort, because we all have limited agency, energy, time, we all have a life. So how can we achieve that? Well, we do so by following the hierarchy of biohacking, the biohacking staircase. So very inspired by Abraham Maslow. I've looked at what actions can a person take to increase their longevity, how many years they're alive, as much as possible with as little effort as humanly possible. And what I saw is that if we improve our air quality and our breathing, we are expected to extend our life expectancy. If we go from the global average to WHO's advice by 4.2 years, you're only using 477 pounds. So this is a huge extension of life expectancy, very little effort, only 30 things you need to do. Most of them are free, most of them you already have in your house. After we improve our air quality and our breathing, we ensure we don't have sleep apnea, etc. Then we move on to sleep and recovery, then our hydration, nutrition and gut health, which is what this seminar is about. Then you're looking at exercising, your social, your sexual health, and your neurological health too. Now, there is a logic to this. For example, when you exercise, you're not building muscle, you're actually breaking muscle. And what you need to do in order to build new ones is you need the building blocks, which is when you're eating, and sleeping is the time when your body actually can repair and recover. So if you're having poor sleep, the last thing I would want you to do is to, go run and do exercise. Skip that, don't focus on that. Fix your sleep first, then fix your diet. After that, you can start exercising. There's no point in working higher up in the hierarchy if the basics aren't provided for. And you see a much bigger health return on investment by focusing on the basics in the pyramid. Now, when it comes to nutrition, it's very, very hard to know what to look for, what to do, because we get 100 different news articles coming every single day. One is saying don't drink soy milk because it's bad for your estrogen. One say, well, don't drink cow's milk because you have lactose, you have other issues with that, or don't do oat milk because oat milk will affect your glucose and that will spike your blood sugar. There are all these different advices which are like completely contradictory and you don't know where to start. Another issue is that just think about a blueberry, a single blueberry. It's got thousands of chemicals in it. So how do we know which chemical in this particular blueberry is affecting us positively or negatively? And even if we take like a huge population, we can't just force them to only eat blueberries, because how do we know that, oh, it was the blueberry that caused the change? And even so, like which chemical within that blueberry, which means that doing research on food and nutrition is almost impossible, because we have to look at big populational data, and even then it's like, is it genetics that's influencing it? It's very, very hard to know. So basically all advice that you get, just take it with a grain of salt. Another thing to think about when you're looking at dietary and nutritional research, the first thing I always look at, has this been tested on humans or on rats? Because animals don't react the same way as humans do. The second thing I'd look at is how many people participated in the study, because if it's only 20 people, it might just be them. And then like the summary of the text, does that correspond to something that seems realistic or not? Now, if we look at what dietitians actually learn at university, it's missing real-world application. They already talk about, say, nutritional science, the macros, the micronutrients, etc., and how to help specific groups, people, for example, who have diabetes. But when it comes to like optimizing for longevity, it's very, very much missing, unfortunately. So let's get practical here. Like, what should you actually be doing? Say you want to improve your diet, your nutrition, and your gut health. Now, I'm trying to bring it really down to the basics, because taking tests and medical tests is quite expensive, not necessarily achievable. But you have an output, hopefully, every day that gives you a direct insight into how your gut is performing, and that is your stool. So the Bristol stool chart was originally developed by the NHS, and it looks at the shape and the consistency of your stool. A type 1 and 2 showcases that you have constipation. 3 and 4, you're in that good zone. 4 is the Goldilocks poo, the one that you want to be achieving. Then you have number 5, 6, and 7, where the person is experiencing diarrhea. Now, why is this so important to be looking at stool in particular? Well, we know that approximately 40% of the population are experiencing chronic GI issues. So 40% of the population, this is huge. I can't almost think of any disease that affects 40% of the population. And then we know that approximately 10 to 15% of the population here in the UK have or should be diagnosed with IBS. Diagnosed approximately 10, up to 15% is what we expect. And even if you are in the Goldilocks poo, where you are number 4 on the Bristol scale, already within that population, we can see that 48% still have GI symptoms. Another thing that was fascinating for me when I was looking into this more is that we saw that the stool is over like populational data is quite different between men and women, and I was curious as to why that was. What we saw is that it tends to have something to do with men having higher testosterone, which leads to faster transit, meaning they're more likely to have a softer stool, whilst women, it varies a bit more, but they're more likely to be constipated. Now, I'm going to go through the different Bristol stool types and give you some very practical advice of what to do if you're experiencing any of these. And with all likelihood, at some point in your life you will, so this is good to save for that day. Now, if you're constipated, the first thing that I would advise people to do is not to take a laxative, but actually to get magnesium citrate or glycinate, which you can buy online or in any pharmacy or over the counter. Now, normally they would advise you to take about 400 milligrams. I think it's quite a low dose. So I would start off at 600 milligrams, but you can go up to 1,200, but be very careful there because it could be shifting to the opposite way. There's something also called a squatty potty. I recommend everybody to get a stool like this because over time what we see in the elderly population, elderly oftentimes suffer from hemorrhoids and other anal issues that are caused over time by a Western position type toilet. It's natural for us to have our knees elevated in order to get rid of a kink that we get in our rectum when we go to the toilet. MTC oil also has a mild laxative effect, which most biohackers will also take to prevent constipation, as well as prunes. They're much more effective than psyllium husk. And a maintenance dose to prevent constipation is around 3 to 4 a day, or if it's chronic, 8 to 10 has shown very effective in studies. Getting very up and personal here. Microlax is more effective. It's an enema that you go via the anus compared to traditional laxatives that are taken orally because it doesn't affect the microbiome in your stomach. And then if you're absolutely desperate as a last resort, you can do an enema at home, or if it lasts for too long, a hospital visit might be required. Coffee enemas are very popular with biohackers, but I caution you to do this because it can affect the gut microbiome. Now, say that your gut is in this Goldilocks 3 and 4 type, but you're still experiencing symptoms. Now, the first thing we want to look at is whether or not the poo is sticky. We want to look at if it's sinking, because if so, there might be a malabsorption issue in the stomach when it comes to fat, and also the fullness. Some people, they take a bite of food, but they can't swallow. They feel like they can't swallow at all, and that could be a bile issue, so the acidity of the stomach. So small intestine bacterial overgrowth, also quite common. And a hack for this is to see, okay, do I have this? What is my breath like? That way we can measure the hydrogen and methane levels. And for functional dysphagia, that's when you feel like you can't swallow, like the stomach is all stiff. The combination of betadine HCl and ginger and artichoke, what's it called? Ginger and artichoke. It's the over-the-counter pills. It's just from the health section. If you mix those two together, they're much more effective than if you take them on their own. And then finally, type 5, which is very common among men. Oftentimes this is caused by a person not having enough fiber, but what I've seen, especially with biohackers who are incredibly healthy diets, is that the stool is soft, and so they add more fiber, but what it does is the fiber just drags more and more water into the stomach. So I had a client who had this problem, and what I realized is that if I look at his diet, it's totally healthy, it's full of vegetables, healthy meats, but there is nothing to sort of solidify the poo. So if we're looking at Eastern medicine, there's this idea of yin and yang, the balance. And if you only eat fiber and you don't eat any starches, you're avoiding rice, you're avoiding potatoes, you're avoiding everything that is unhealthy, carrots, etc., then you don't have anything to solidify the stool. And so what I said to him, let's try something crazy. Let's just add rice or potatoes. And we did, and within 2 days, the symptoms were gone. And this is a client who's had gastrointestinal issues and worked with over 5 different GI experts. Once we suggested this idea, they said, that's a brilliant idea, it might work, and it did. So instead of just thinking about this is a perfect diet, is it a perfect diet for this person? Let's start with how does the stomach work for them, and then look at what do I need to add or subtract to achieve the perfect poo. Now, if we're looking at a type 5 or a type 6, we're most likely looking at some form of malabsorption, inflammation, leaky gut. There's something going on here. We shouldn't have a type 6 or type 7 just because of diet. Type 5, very likely a diet issue. So the first thing we need to do is to try to repopulate the stomach with healthy bacteria. The most well-studied bacteria that helps if you're type 6 or type 7 is the, I'm going to butcher this word, Saccharomyces boulardii, and you can buy it over the counter or on Amazon. I always look at like how many billions of bacteria does this have to make sure that I'm spending less money, and then you want to add some fiber to that bacteria in order to give it food so that it can multiply. Activated charcoal also helps bind food toxins. If there's something you've eaten that's caused this, you can also use things like chlorella, but activated charcoal is very effective. And then make sure that you get some electrolytes because you will be losing fluids. And drinking water without adding electrolytes will end up dehydrating you further. Another thing you can do if you have type 6 or type 7 is to fast. Give your stomach some time to reset, to get good again. Don't force it. And also, if you're eating, where do I have it? Here. Try to eat as much food that will absorb liquids as possible. So we're looking at bananas, rice, potatoes, anything that will soak up water. Okay. We talked about electrolyte depletion. And here, another thing. If you keep wiping and you say you have diarrhea for several days, the pH will be affecting your skin, and so all of a sudden you can develop hemorrhoids and skin irritation. So the best thing to do there is to just make sure that you have a bidet or that you wash instead. Just be very, very careful with the area because it can be very sensitive, and also recommend using a zinc-based moisturizer to protect the skin. All right, we mentioned fasting. Food sensitivities. Now, this is a really big topic. Everything you eat, no matter what you eat, will cause sensitivities. So if you're looking at plants, for example, no, humans can't eat all plants. Some plants we can eat, we can digest, some that we can't. All plants will let out different types of toxins in order to protect themselves from being eaten by predators. We are predators, insects are predators, etc. Now, what humans do is we co-evolve with these plants and we learn to kind of handle these toxins, but they're still affecting us. So some things in the plants are healthy and we want them because they're good for us, but certain things are bad. And this is why people who have really bad inflammation and chronic gut issues are sometimes advised to go on the carnivore diet because you don't have any of these like toxins that you find in foods. So a low inflammation kind of diet. And if you were to do a food sensitivities test, you will see that it will look something like this. Now, every single food here, we have vanilla, anchovies, etc. It does show up here on the scale of inflammation. It's causing something. You see it's green. So it's not nothing, it's always something. And when we call something an intolerance, that we're sensitive to it, is when you see it spike up, like yellow here. Or if it's as much as red, we would call it an allergy. In reality, it's just how our bodies react to the food. What's really interesting is if I was to repeat the same test on a person 6 months later, it will look totally different. So on one, it might show that, oh, you're allergic to carrots, but then all of a sudden you're not, or you were sensitive to carrots, but you weren't later. Why is that? Well, the inflammation and inflammatory reaction to food, it changes over time. So if your stomach is really strong, if it's working really well, you have lots of good healthy gut bacteria, Akkermansia is doing what it should, then you will not most likely show up with sensitivities to the food. It's first when things get more sensitive and more delicate that we start reacting. And so we can go from being perfectly fine to all of a sudden be super allergic and super sensitive to things we never had a problem with in the past. And we can go back to being perfectly fine to eating it later down the line. So what do we do about this? Okay, some dietitians, they suggest that we remove everything that you're sensitive to and you only eat the things that show up green, and then you'll be perfectly fine. But what could happen, and what we've also seen is sometimes, is that the body then doesn't become used to it. Kind of, oh, I never see it. So when you do introduce that food, you become hypersensitive because the body wonders, what is this? I'm not used to this. I don't remember this type of food. Another method is to do the opposite. It's to basically eliminate everything and just eat the thing that you're sensitive to. Because then the body will focus on digesting it, and it will adjust, thinking that this is my one nutritional input. I need to learn and adjust myself to digest this type of protein or this type of glucose. And so we will do that. Another thing that I find really fascinating is they did a study on pregnant women in Scandinavia, where I'm from. And they looked at women who have a genetic predisposition to be allergic to nuts. But they weren't allergic, they just had a genetic predisposition. And then they asked half the group, eat lots of peanuts, eat lots of nuts every single day. And the other group, they said, don't touch it. And then they looked at the children when they were born over time to see were they allergic or not. And what they saw is that the children in the group where the women ate a lot of nuts, they didn't develop the allergies even though they were predisposed to, and vice versa. So looking at all this data, my suggestion would be try different things, but also if you are a bit sensitive to something, you might either make a decision, I'm good, I can live without it, or I want to teach my body to break this down and I'm going to adjust that. Or just fix your stomach altogether, make it as stable and healthy, low inflammation as possible. Hope that made sense. Okay. Now, if we look historically, there's been different epochs of food. Around the 1940s, we discovered malnutrition. We discovered that there were specific bacteria that made children have higher functional stomachs and not end up with SID, early deaths of babies. So we then developed later down the line the recommended daily allowance of what to eat and how much to eat, which at the beginning focused both on macros, so how much protein should we eat, how much carbs, how much fats, and then eventually we added fiber because we realized that fiber was really important to the diet. And then the recommended daily allowance was to help us avoid malnutrition because a lot of people suffered from having not sufficient, say, B12 or vitamin D. And so that's where nutritional science used to be. And then saturated fats became a thing, and everybody was scared of eating fat. And then you looked at the different kind of diets, and then it became the Atkins diet. And eventually people were really scared of carbohydrates because they thought this is what's going to cause illness. Now today, we're back on having more of a focus on eating a variety of foods. We're looking at introducing as many fruits and vegetables as possible. There is a focus more so on having a high protein intake diet and avoiding highly processed food. Now, if I was to advise you on what do we do with this information, is the first thing I would do is I would get a full blood test. If you go to NHS and you say, I don't feel good, they're going to test maybe your iron level, they're going to test maybe your B12, but they're not permitted to test everything, all the micronutrients that could be deficient, which is very annoying, but that's just the way it is. So I would recommend you to go to something like Randox, where you do a full blood works, and it's going to cost you around £300, which I know is a lot of money. But if you do that, you can look at where are you deficient. And most of us will be deficient in something, or will be too high in something else. Now, in my case, I was very, very deficient on magnesium. And even though I increased my magnesium and took a lot of supplements, it still didn't make a huge difference. So in my case, I had to really take a lot of it, and I saw vitamin D deficiencies. By simply going by the recommended daily allowance, you can prevent deficiencies, but you can't fix them. because it won't give you enough of every micronutrient to get to the level where you need to be. Just to like summarize, micronutrients are like vitamins, like vitamin A, vitamin K, vitamin D, etc. All right, so yeah, I mentioned that once you've done a blood work and you know that you fixed your basics, I would recommend repeating that blood work after about 6 months. So any supplements that you take, that you know you haven't overdone it or underdone it, you've kind of found that perfect equilibrium. If you have more money to spare, I'd look at doing a food sensitivity test, which looks like this. You could also, after you've done that, if it still haven't figured out what's going on, what's wrong, what's not working, I would look at doing a stool test. So it's very easy, you do it at home, you get a little packet and you do a little scoop of your poo and then put it in the vial, and then you do that over 3 days. And you just send it off and then you get the results back. And there you will see if there's, for example, like poor absorption, if there is maybe some bacteria going on. There could be lots of things that's causing an unhealthy gut. This is a test that I wouldn't necessarily do unless you're symptomatic, but that's my priority. So priority 1, blood works with something like Randox. Number 2, food sensitivity, and then finally doing a fecal test. Those are the main tests that you want to be doing. If you then have more money left over, the next step, and I think this will be very, very, very accessible in say 2 to 3 years time, is to do a genetics test. So you want to get your whole genome sequencing, ideally something like 30 whole genome sequencing, meaning they check your genes 30 times over, so it's very accurate. What that will do is it will be able to help you with a genetic nutritionist, like gene nutritionist, or it's kind of their specialty. You have to look it up to find someone who specializes in that. What they will do is they will look at your specific genetics and your predispositions for how you process different macros and how your body is more or less able to create essential nutrients. So there are some people who struggle, for example, with carbohydrates, and they need maybe longer carbohydrates. Some people struggle with like how their body processes fat, etc. We can see there's a huge variety along the population. So saying you need to eat this much protein, or you need to eat this much fat, etc. and this type, it's kind of useless to give populational advice unless you're looking at that person and their specific genetics. This is why I just don't think it's like general advice is very useful. The body can also convert certain vitamins and create them for themselves, but it varies significantly among the population. So some people are really good at doing that, whilst others are not. Okay. So when you do a change, when we're trying to optimize your diet, I would look at finding 5 foods that you want to exclude, or you want to remove. So say, for example, in my case, Snickers. I love Snickers, I'm very addicted to Snickers. I want to remove Snickers, I want to remove X, Y, Z. And I set these 5 things up. And then I look at, are there 5 different alternatives that I know are healthy, that I don't eat much of, but I really love, say blueberries. And I put them up, so these are the things I want to change. Now, why do I suggest you doing this instead of a huge change to your body? Is because the body doesn't tend to do very well with extreme changes, and neurologically doing that many changes are not sustainable. So if you can do a small change of exchanging something you know is bad for you to something that is good, and you do that every so often, over the course of a year, your diet will be significantly different, but also you will have the time to evaluate whether or not a change, a swap, is working for you or not. So when you're starting your change, you want to be measuring, how am I reacting to that? So if you set your alarm to say 6 p.m. every day, score your energy and your focus from a scale of 1 to 10. And day 1, when you start the changes, you want to start at 5 so that you can see, am I feeling better or worse or the same as the day prior? Okay. So yeah, just categorize the different changes. So 5 foods that you eat that are bad for you, that you want to get rid of, 5 healthy foods that you already eat that you would like to eat more of, and then 5 healthy foods that you love but you never buy. And it could be something like solace or a fruit or a vegetable, whatever it is that you feel like, oh, I would love to do more of that, but I can't justify it because maybe it's a bit expensive. Whatever that is that excites you, think is good for you, enjoy that. Now, just to summarize like the different types of stool, if you're type 1-2, constipation, more fiber, more water, more movement, out, exercise, move around. Type 3-4, perfect, keep doing what you're doing if it works, or focus on how can I improve my gut by introducing more Akkermansia, more prebiotics and probiotics together. And type 5-6 loose stool, simplify the food, reduce irritants that you saw earlier, so minimize the number of foods that you eat to locate the possible inflammation. Another thing that I've noticed with clients who have gut issues is oftentimes it can be the irritation in the stomach can be caused by heavy metals. So heavy metals, things like arsenic, lead, mercury, oftentimes come from food or from water. And by reducing the heavy metals, we can go back to having a functional gut lining. How do we know if we have heavy metals? Most likely all of us do, unfortunately. If you do a populational test today versus 20 years ago, you'll see that we have so much toxins in our bodies compared to what we've ever had before, microplastics, etc., and that does cause gut issues. I would suggest potentially if you've done all the other tests and you're curious about this, or you know you have eaten a lot of, say, tuna in the past, you know that you've been exposed to maybe not the cleanest food, etc., then I think it's worth doing. Now there are different types of heavy metal tests. You can do a test with the hair. I don't find that very accurate. You can test it with the blood. Again, I don't find that very accurate. And you can test it via urine. And there's 2 ways of testing heavy metals via the urine. One is to just like test the urine, but the problem there is it will tell you a snapshot of what you've eaten in the last 2-3 days. So I had my client do that, and the arsenic was through the roof. Why was the arsenic through the roof? Well, it was actually because he'd been eating chicken the day before, and chicken has a lot of arsenic, and the body does shed it. It doesn't like cling on to everything, but some of it. So to be more accurate, to actually get a snapshot of the heavy metals in the body, you want to be doing a test that is provoked. Meaning that a doctor will prescribe you a DMSA or a provoking agent. It's a chemical that makes your body shed metals, good and bad metals. And you'll be doing that right before you do the urine test so that you can see a more accurate composition of what are the metals that are in our deeper organs. And there's a very interesting way of getting rid of heavy metals, and that is by doing a DMSA protocol, meaning that for 3 days you take these chelating agents, and then during the off days, the other 4 days of the week, you take a lot of supplements. So you want to be refueling your body with healthy metals like copper, zinc, etc., because everything goes out. And then you do that over a 3-week period, repeat the urine test, and what most likely you will see is that a much, much better functioning gut at the end of that. Now, there's a very quick reset that I learned by a functional medicine doctor in the US that worked for me and worked for so many people, and I just wanted to share that with you. So, if you have gut issues, try this. If your gut is working really well, maybe don't try this because it could then cause a new issue. So you want to start with oregano oil on a fasted stomach first thing in the morning. And the reason you take oregano oil is that it will loosen up anything that's stuck in the gut lining. Many people have, over time, almost like a film, a very thick film that builds up in the intestine, which causes poor absorption. And if you Google this, you'll see almost like a huge snake that some people poo out after they've gone on these cleanses after, say, 2 weeks. So by taking oregano oil, what we end up doing is that it loosens up that lining, but it won't really come off, and so you get rid of it. So what you want to do then is 4 hours later, you want to add activated charcoal, so once it's loosened up from the walls of the intestines, it clings onto something, which is the activated charcoal. And then after, when this has the ability to be flushed out, you want to repopulate the lining of the stomach. So that's by adding probiotics and prebiotics, meaning you add new healthy bacteria and food for the bacteria. If you just do probiotics, so healthy gut bacteria, the problem is, yeah, you eat them and there's a few billion there, but they die very quickly. So in order for them to make babies and thrive and grow, they need food, which is fiber. So you always want to take your probiotics with fiber, so prebiotics together. If you follow this for approximately 3 days, you can eat late in the evening. I know it's not ideal, or you just fast during that. What you will very likely see is a complete microbiome change in your stomach. When it comes to the kind of probiotics that we want to go for, look for things like Akkermansia. There's a very good supplement, I think from Weight World, that do, I can't remember how many different types of bacteria they use, but they use 3 different types of lactofido and bifidobacteria that are shown to affect mental health, because we know that 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut by gut bacteria, not by ourselves. About 10% is produced in the brain. So we've also seen a very big correlation between people who are depressed and have gut issues. So what I find really, really interesting is that if you're depressed and you go to NHS, they will give you an SSRI to increase the amount of serotonin in your brain. Great. But if serotonin isn't necessarily produced in the brain but in the gut, shouldn't the first thing we'll look at is fixing the gut? Shouldn't the first thing be, here's some prebiotics and probiotics, try them for like 3 weeks. If you're still depressed, then let's try an SSRI. However, it's not the go-to protocol. If one of you or someone you know suffers from depression, ask them about how is their gut health, because we've seen that 60% of people with depression, chronic depression, have gut issues. So it's a very strong correlation between the two. All right. So I talked about probiotics and prebiotics. Now I want to speak briefly about enzymes. So enzymes, they help break down the food. If you eat a lot, like quite a big portion, which most of us does, it's more than what our bodies are naturally made to do. Especially when it comes to like big protein, the body often struggles to digest it and you get GI symptoms. If you just go online and just search for like enzymes, like papaya enzymes, and you take that together with the food, it will help break it down and you feel a lot less gassy, a lot less bloated. It feels much, much, much better. So I highly recommend just buying some enzymes and add that if you feel like, okay, I'm gonna have a heavy meal. If every once in a while, okay, I'm gonna go out and do a takeout, add some enzymes, prebiotics, probiotics, and just by doing that, you see a huge difference in your gut performance. Movement for digestion, just go for a 5-minute walk after your meals. There's a bicycle leg trick for bloating. You can lay down and then just, just cycle, because that will create the movement for your stomach to start moving the way it should. And then there's the sun and the moon tummy trick. So they do this on small babies who have colic, I don't know what that's called in English, or GI issues, where you start at the top of your stomach and you do a full circle, which is the sun, and then a half circle, which is the moon, to help push things through. Let's talk a little bit about hunger and satiety. So with the GLP-1s, the semaglutides, Ozempics, Mounjaro, etc., that are coming out, we're learning much, much more about hunger. It used to be that we thought obesity is a disease of a weak mind, but we're learning more and more that that's actually not the case. It's more of like how our bodies are programmed to make us eat and make us stop eating. This is why some people really struggle to put on weight and they're never hungry, they forget about eating, whilst other people like, how can you forget about eating? That I can't stop thinking about it. Food is all that's in my head. And if you are in the category where food is all the time in your head, it might be worth looking into things like Ozempic. Now, I'm not saying it's for everybody. I really don't. Why do I say it's not for everybody? Well, if you can easily lose weight and keep it off, like, great, do that and try to focus on that. But if it's really, really hard and you are obese, we know that there are many health consequences of being obese versus taking Ozempic, which we don't know what will happen if you take Ozempic for 10 years. We have no idea. But we don't know what will happen versus we know this is bad for you, the outcome is probably go on it. Versus if you are already skinny enough and for you it's really about like, oh, just doing a few tweaks and changes, you know you can do it. Going then on something like Ozempic that we don't know what the outcome is because it hasn't existed for a long time, we don't know what will happen in 20 years. That is not a very great thing to do because you're putting yourself at risk when you don't know what the outcomes of that risk is, because you're already able to do it on your own. So I'm not like judging here, I'm just saying that it's definitely a tool that is very much worth looking at, and we don't know what will happen over time. Maybe it turns out that this is great and everybody should be on it, maybe it's not, we don't know, and that's what I wanted to share. Right. Now, protein is of course important for our muscles, etc. But what we have seen is when you eat bigger amounts of protein, it takes longer for the body to break down, and so it stays longer in our GI tract, and it keeps your satiety up for longer. But simply adding more protein to the diet doesn't do it as much as adding fiber. So while this idea of like we want 2 grams of protein per every kilo of weight in order to like achieve this like high protein, not as important as focusing on the fiber. If you can get your fiber up to like the daily recommendations, so you can get your fiber up to 20 grams a day, that will keep you full. Protein helps a little bit, but the fiber, that's where you will feel full for a very, very long time. When we're talking about eating meat and not eating meat, if you have achieved a healthy weight, there is no real need to eat animal protein. But what I have seen is that if someone is trying to lose weight and you're going on Ozempic, etc., and you're eating below at a calorie deficit, so you're eating at 1100 calories a day, then it becomes very, very, very hard to reach your protein goals without going with animal protein. Why? It's because plant protein just don't have the same amount of protein that a animal protein will have. So I'm not saying that one thing is better than the other. The good thing about like plant protein is that they often have a lot of fiber, which is great because we want to hit that. But there's the balance to be made and the advice depending on the person and what they're currently doing with themselves. If they are at a maintenance level, I really don't see the point in having to, follow a carnivorous diet or having a keto diet, etc., because they're already maintaining it quite well. If you are, for example, going to eat junk food or drink alcohol, there's things you can do. If you're looking at eating, say, tuna, for example, I would add like very dark leafy greens or chlorella or activated charcoal, because these are binders that can bind the toxins, they can bind the heavy metals to it. If you're going to eat something that will cause bloating, add digestive enzymes. If you're going to, for example, fast, you want to be adding, say, lemon and Himalayan salt to add electrolytes in order to function better. And also if you're, say, drinking alcohol, in order to bring here, how to read food labels. A few little things to think about when you go shopping is that in every food label, you will see the macros, but also the ingredients will go from most prevalent to least prevalent. And if you look at, say, 2 jams, you can figure out that this one has a lot of sugar and this one is mainly just natural fruit, and then go with that one. Expensive doesn't necessarily mean equal better. Another thing you can do is, say you have like ChatGPT on your phone, just talk into it and say, I'm adding X grams of this, and this is the macros, and then we'll add it up during the day and give you feedback in real time, which I find to be better than most dietitians, to be honest with you. Another thing that's like understudied and underused is Chinese medicine and also Ayurvedic medicine. If you're having health issues with your gut, you try a dietitian. The next step I would do is to speak with an Ayurvedic doctor, because the whole like history of their medical approach starts with food. So if they want to, for example, fix, say, sexual health issues or sleep or digestive issues, it all starts with the food. The food is the basis for like the whole medical philosophy. By fixing and adjusting the different types of ingredients, they're seen exactly like medicine. It's very, very fascinating. It's something we don't do in the West. In Chinese medicine, they can see things like your deficiencies just by looking at the tongue, looking at the texture of the tongue, the color of the tongue, and looking at the irises, your skin, etc. What I found really fascinating was when I took a client to a Chinese medicine doctor and to an Ayurvedic doctor, was that they were able to determine deficiencies without looking at the medical paperwork. And when I looked at the paperwork from our medical tests, I saw that they corresponded to what was said by these doctors. So because they haven't had access to like blood works, etc. over time, they've developed a whole different system of looking at symptoms on the body, which is absolutely fascinating. And so this is also something I think is very, very much worth looking into. Okay, so finally, try to not overwhelm yourself. Just do one thing that you learned from this talk today. And by simply, again, introducing 5 things that you would like to introduce and removing 5 things that you don't want to be doing anymore that you know is bad for you, you will improve your health faster than any meal plan. Right, and a little checklist. Take photos, track your energy, pick one easy food to cut out, add one in, and try the 3-day gut reset with oregano oil and activated charcoal. Right. Thank you. Any questions at all? Oh, yes.
Thank you for the talk first. I find a couple of the things that you mentioned quite surprising, but specifically when you talked about serotonin being only 10% of them generated in the brain and 90%. Okay, and only 90% of it being generated in the bacteria, and that you found quite surprising that doctors prescribe ISRIs to inhibit the recaptation of serotonin. The reason for that is that serotonin doesn't travel through the brain-blood barrier, so actually all this serotonin that is generated in the bacteria doesn't actually have any impact in the brain. So I just wanted to mention that maybe you could argue that tryptophan as a precursor could travel through the brain-blood barrier, but if you take serotonin as a supplement, or even if you make your bacteria generate more serotonin, that doesn't actually travel through.
Is that because the size of the serotonin molecule?
Yes, and other enzymes, it's a monoamine, as dopamine and so on. It's also degraded in the blood flow, so just to be a little bit cautious about that.
No. What do you think, why do you think there's a correlation between depression and serotonin deficiencies due to specific lack of bacteria in the gut, just out of curiosity? Because I didn't know that.
Can you repeat the question?
I didn't know what you just told me, so that's really interesting.
Okay.
But when they've seen that people have low levels of gut bacteria that specifically create serotonin, and they've seen that those people have a higher prevalence of depression, do you think it might be just like...
Because there's another thing called the gut microbiome axis, and serotonin is not the only thing affecting that connection. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So you mentioned with the sensitivities that there are kind of three options. You can lean into the foods that you're really sensitive to and try to get your body to adapt, or you can avoid them completely. Or you also said, I think, or you can try and make your gut as, I think it was, to instead make your gut as healthy and low inflammation as possible. How do you achieve that third option?
So I would try to look at the inflammatory markers and see if they're high or not. In my case, they were very, very high, and we also saw that my ferritin, so my iron was sky high through the roof, which is an indication of high inflammation. So what I then did as a result of that is I went and donated blood to bring that down into a healthy level, and that actually had a cascading effect on my gut results. Well, how to improve the gut lining? I think like fasting would be very beneficial, because we can after about 4 to 5 hours on a fasted stomach, the body goes into a kind of a cleansing stage. So I would be looking at potentially the inflammatory marker, see if you have high ferritin, and then try intermittent fasting. Those would be the first things I would look at. Yeah.
And so like as a lifestyle instead, to try and make your, instead of like a one-time thing, what sort of, would leaning into those sensitivities or moving away from those sensitivities be more supportive of that, of a healthy gut?
The first thing I'd try to do is to improve like the stool to get to level 3-4, and once you've done that, because that's key, if you haven't fixed that, there's no point in doing the other things. Once you get it to your stool to be like a good solid texture, then whether or not you should exclude things or introduce things, or only introduce that's a very good question. I think, do you know what you're triggered by?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't used to be triggered by lactose, but now I am. For example.
Now you are.
There's other things as well, but that's an example.
Yeah. I mean, do you have enough time to lean into it? Because there's like a lifestyle consequence of doing so. So maybe you have to give yourself like a little bit more than a weekend to do that, like about a week.
As in time to like adjust to the change and to feel the inflammation.
Because you will feel worse before you feel better.
So when you feel better, then is that like a...
It's not a guarantee.
Yeah, true. Is that like a health-wise, it's okay to put your body through that for a certain amount of time, and then it's healthy to then have that?
Well, I think research it a bit more, but I have seen quite a few videos where people have done that, not necessarily with lactose, because it could just be that you don't have that enzyme to break it down, and it might be other things within milk that you're sensitive to. Like, I'm not sensitive to lactose, but I'm sensitive to other proteins in milk, which I react to. I mean, if you're lactose
there's also things like bell peppers, for example, that would set my stomach off at some points in my life.
Yeah, and don't do, if you're going to like live off a particular thing for a little while, for your body to learn how to break it down and handle it, don't do all of them at once, because it's too much. Or maybe do a bell pepper only diet for a few days or like a week, to see if you can like get used to that and if things are starting to get better. But monitor yourself during that time. I mean, I personally like going like hard into something, and it's just like, let's F it, let's do it. But you just have to see how you feel about doing so. But I think it's kind of worthwhile doing if you're overall healthy otherwise, because having to live your life with excluding more and more things, and some people do, and then they end up like eating almost nothing. That's not necessarily a fun way to live. So if you can do it, to try to like reincorporate the thing to make life easier, then I think it's worth trying at least once in your life.
So it's more of a lifestyle choice than a health choice, really?
I think so, because almost everything can be replaced with something else. But what we see, some people get sensitive, and they get sensitive to more and more things, and then the dietitian says, exclude that, exclude that, exclude that, and all of a sudden they have nothing they can eat anymore, and it's just like, it's not a way to live. Like, I don't want to be, do what Michaela Peterson is doing and only eating, beef and salt. Like, it's also expensive. Yeah, like you deserve to be able to have a more varied diet. And if yeah, worth trying. All right. Yes.
Can I pass that to you?
Thank you very much. Very fascinating talk by you. Thank you. Was wondering if you would have any suggestions towards ADHD and executive function through diet microbiome, especially within the executive function that people have difficulties in planning, organizing, calendar, things. Thank you.
Are you asking about how to, like, what foods to eat and avoid, or are you asking more about like how to structure your day in terms of eating?
Any of them, actually.
Okay, so I
general
have ADHD too, as you probably can tell, diagnosed. Avoid sugar, avoid stimulants as much as you can, coffee, etc., because they can make it harder. We've seen that, I wouldn't say like necessarily low carb, but more of a, like, if you, among your carbs, try to eat like slow absorbing starches, things more like, instead of eating, you know, sugary things, aim for, say, sweet potato or something that digests much slower, so you have like more complex carbohydrates, or maybe try something like a little bit closer to a keto. Just be careful with the sugars, basically. Careful with the stimulants. Then, when it comes, and then fasting works really great for people with ADHD because you're evening out that sugar. So if you can, look at a 8-16 kind of diet where you eat in an 8-hour window and then you fast for the rest. So to try, because what you see happening when you fast is that you get this like hyper focus that hard to explain, but you might enjoy that more. When it comes to organizing food, I tend to look at like what macros do I want to achieve. So how much protein am I looking at, how much fiber, etc. And then when I go shopping, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm gonna make say mussels with like I'm gonna have this bread, and then for the dessert I'm gonna have strawberries with this like protein thing, and then my appetizers I'm gonna do a crudité, and then these are the vegetables I'm gonna put to the side, and this is the little yogurt I want to dip it in. And so I buy all those things, and I buy things that I find really exciting too because I want to enjoy what I'm eating. And then I plan so that I have enough of the proteins, I have enough of different vegetables, even if I get bored, and I have enough of the sweet, fun things. I have enough blueberries and like maybe like some dark chocolate, whatever makes you happy to add to that. And then in terms of fats, the food itself has so much healthy fats. So I like things like mackerel, salmon, I really like that. If I eat chicken, I like chicken thighs, not chicken breasts because they're boring. So I utilize that fat from the chicken skin, for example, and then I reapply that to the rest of the vegetables. So I might not even add oil if that's the case. But then if I'm adding fats, I might add things like a little bit of high polyphenol olive oil, or shred down some Parmesan, or like some fats. So I think in terms of like, what healthy fats do I have? What proteins do I have? Do those proteins have fats? Yes or no? What vegetables and fiber do I add? And what's my dessert gonna look like? Because that's important too. Okay. So those are the categories, and then fill up the fridge. And then you can be like, oh, actually I don't feel like that, but I have this different combination. And then I hate spending time cooking because I'm lazy. So I have my air fryer, like I have my portions, and then I take a photo of the food afterwards. I weigh on my scale, and I talk into my AI, and then it adds the macros for me. So at the end of the day, I can see, okay, I'm actually low on, say, protein, or I'm low on fiber. And then I just add something small to hit my macros. Did any of that make sense?
You don't have ADHD. That's so advanced.
Yeah. I don't know if that made sense.
No worries.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, firstly, thank you very much for the talk. I loved all the practical advice, was amazing. I love Snickers as well. If I was a client coming on board with you, do you have a certain, I know it's different for everyone because it's a very personalized thing, nutrition. Is there a certain set of things that you go about putting people through? Is it questionnaires, surveys? How do you actually assess like a client coming on board? Because there's so many tests. There's gut microbiome, there's sensitivity tests. Is there like a barrage of tests that you do for everyone, and then you go into more detail? Or how do you do it?
So the first thing I get them to do is to, they don't have to necessarily show me, but they tend to do is like take photos of your stool and track, or take photos of every single meal that they have, so I know exactly what they're eating. Because they're ultra high net worth individuals, then they tend to have a chef or like a PA that does cook for them. And so I then look at how do they cook, what tools do they use? Do they use things like Teflon? Then that's going to get binned, because we don't want any microplastics like go through everything, making sure that it's clean. How are things stored? Blah blah blah. And then so as little as possible is experienced by the client. They have to do as little work as humanly possible, and as much of it as possible is like on me, because they don't want to spend time and energy on it. And so I look at what they've been eating. I track their gut through photos, and actually it's funny, ChatGPT can tell you what number you are, which is great. It's so cool. I don't know how it does that. And then we do a lot of medical tests, because it's kind of the basis. Because when I introduce things or I change something, I need to be able to track, is it working, is it not working? I know that not everybody can afford to do it, but I really, really urge to like save up for doing like a big blood panel. Like really urge to do that, because if you have micronutrient deficiencies, which many of us do, that the consequences on your body accumulates over time. So if there's one thing that you have too little of, that will mess up different systems in your body, and that will accumulate damage over time. So if you can fix that now, it will really save yourself in the future. If I could just do any take home, please do that as soon as you can afford it.
Thank you. And just sorry, one more question. So probably the most famous biohacker in the world at the moment is Brian Johnson. Yep. I think people fall into the category of either he's insane or either he's the Messiah. What do you think of his advice and practical elements of his diet and nutrition that he talks about?
His nutrition is for him. So Brian made the conscious decision that he doesn't want to eat meat unless he kind of has to. He still does, because he takes a collagen that's from bovine, because it's very hard to get it like in a more like absorbable way. So he's not totally vegan, but it's his choice, and his body works well for that. For example, me, I'm currently trying to lose weight. I'm not doing a very good job doing it, but slowly. That means that for me it would be very hard to be on a plant-based diet, even though when I'm in maintenance, that's not an issue at all. So I would say that his diet would work for maybe like 80% of the population. But again, like, if you already have, say, loose stool, and you did Brian's diet today, you're going to have a lot of diarrhea, like a lot. But if you already have a hard stomach, then that would be perfect. And my suspicion is that Brian might just have like his natural baseline is more towards like hard stool, and that's what he needs to bring it to a number 4. And so we all have to think about where are we now, and how do we adjust ourselves to be as healthy as possible. Brian likes eating mushy food. He likes baby food. He likes like blending things. And for most people, they like chewing. Like I like chewing. And that's a choice, the conscious choice he made, because he just likes like drinking his calories. So like I wouldn't advise that to most people, because generally speaking, people like chewing. Like they like solid food. And he doesn't use a lot of spices, and spices are fun. Like when I'm trying to lose weight, I add a lot of spices because I'm trying to make the food less bland. And he eats very bland food. That's my view.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much for the talk. I was diagnosed with IBS, I think 3-4 years ago. And I had my own journey of trying to figure it out. I found it really interesting how bread was impacting a lot. And I was really curious what you think about, in particular, bread and milk, because it's very different in how it's processed in the UK versus, I'm from Romania, so versus Romania, I feel like when I lived in Romania, I was never lactose intolerant. I came to the UK, I felt like I became lactose intolerant. In Romania, you can buy raw milk, boil it at home, and then drink it, which I think it's a big part of it. And then another thing was bread. So I feel like also the quality of the flour in UK differs a lot from the quality of the flour in Romania for whatever reason.
Yes.
And I was curious what you think about those differences and how do you navigate them?
Yeah, so that's a good question. In the UK, we have a lot of grain that is similar to the ones they use in the US, which are modified grains that have much more, what's the name of the protein in bread? Sorry, gluten. Yeah, they just have a lot more gluten than the ancient grains that we have in Europe. So if you go to France and you go to like boulangerie, the wheat that they will use is more of an ancient grain, and they tend to do sourdough. And because it's sourdough, it kind of breaks down the gluten, whilst if you're adding yeast, it doesn't really break down the gluten, so it's still there. So if you eat sourdough and you eat an ancient grain, most people can handle that really well. But if you then instead go for American bread, which has, not only is it like a new type of grain that have a lot of gluten, which is like a little bit difficult for us to digest, and they use yeast, all of a sudden it's a different product, and it's entirely different how we respond to that. And you can develop a gluten intolerance by swapping over from something you used to eat to that, because your body is so shocked by it that it just, all of a sudden it doesn't want to go near bread at all. Gluten intolerance is something that can develop at any point in your life. It's not something you're necessarily born with, and so that's why it's quite interesting. I personally try to only eat sourdough, and yeah, I don't like the bread here, I get it. For milk, yes, raw milk is different. It's got different bacteria that are good for you, but then people are afraid of, like, you know, poisoning people. However, like, if you look at allergies, for example, you see that homes where the parents clean obsessively and there's no mud, there's like, the kids are living in the cities, they use chemicals, etc. They have way more allergies than kids who are grown up on a farm on the countryside, who, like, you know, put their fingers in their mouth and they get exposed to, you know, poo from cows and from everything, and from they're just not as sensitive. They just don't have as many allergies. And I find that to be quite interesting. So when someone is young, I do advise, like, if you have like kids or will have kids in the future, to try to expose them to as much dirt as possible, as long as they don't get sick, like as much as possible without getting sick, so that their immune systems are used to it, they are exposed to it. Eat peanuts when you're pregnant, like, do that so that the child has an ability to not react with an immunoreaction to what's seen as a foreign, strange thing. I think that's the best advice I can give.
Yeah, thank you so much. There was a study in Sweden, actually, they swapped tarmac playgrounds with dirt playgrounds, and they saw a really good impact on kids' health in terms of gut health. So that's really cool.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Sorry. It's okay. Thank you.
I wanted to ask, career pathway-wise, you said you started in finance.
Yep.
How did you move to what you do now, and what do you do on a daily basis?
Oh yeah, so I kind of weirdly kind of scouted to do what I do. So I ran events, like biohacking kind of events, because I was interested in it, and transhumanism. And then on one of the events that I ran, there was a couple who really liked me, and turns out that they had started a longevity clinic. And separately, though, one was CEO, one was COO, they didn't talk together. And both of them got back to me offering me a job, which was quite funny. And I was like, because it was like, I didn't think that I could ever work in that industry because I didn't have a bio degree. Like, I first studied law, and then I studied philosophy, specializing on the ethics of bioenhancements. And so it wasn't like necessarily like a natural jump, but yeah, I mean, I got the opportunity, and I was like, yeah, of course, like, I'll work here. And then you just learn. And I think the combination of having been obsessed with biohacking and longevity for so many years, being put into that environment, it was like I could just unlock my passion. And I never felt like weird or like I didn't belong. Yeah, I expected to not feel like I belong because I didn't have the degree background, but learning from law to research and look at, kind of papers and then having that curiosity and the personal experience of why this is so important is what led me to be able to do it now full time.
And another question, sorry, the cold exposure after a meal, what was the basis or the reason behind that?
Oh, cold exposure, I did a whole thing about this before. There are many health benefits of doing both cold exposure and heat exposure. The combination of the two, swapping between hot and cold, can be quite beneficial, to oh God, what was it? Sorry, I need to, I had it here somewhere. Yes, okay. It affects the vagus nerve when you do cold exposure. So the digestive tract becomes affected by the cold exposure, and so goes into a different function. How do I explain this? I can't explain this very well.
In Swedish.
Ja, ta det på svenska istället. Let me Google this. Let me Google this.
Sorry.
No, you're right. Okay. What? Why do we want cold exposure? Yeah, stimulate the vagus nerve, increase metabolic activation, improve mental alertness. But why do we want to? Okay, can help manage post-meal blood sugar spikes. Cold shock immediately after a heavy meal can cause discomfort or indigestion. Okay. All right, so don't do it too much. All right, there we are. That's the answer.
Thank you. And the last thing was just, could we have access to the slides?
Sure, yeah, happy to do that.
Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions?
Husband and the biohacking WhatsApp group.
That would be so nice. Thank you.
Great. Any other question? No. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, you talked about alcohol and curbing some of the potential negative effects of it, or how does this work again? Because I was curious.
Oh yeah, so obviously you want to be looking at electrolytes to fix that, and then things that can improve your liver function. But there's a little shot you can take before you drink alcohol. See if I can find that company that does it. No. Where is it? Where is it? I can't remember the name of the brand. Has anyone tried it? It's there's this shot you can take that negates the downsides of alcohol, so it doesn't have the same negative health response to it. Oh, what's it called? What did you say? Keto? Okay, so hydrate and electrolytes, yeah, simple, because you will lose sodium, magnesium, potassium. Consume a high-fat, moderate protein, low-carb meal beforehand. Okay. Where's that drink? There's a shot that, if you go to a billionaire party, they tend to be out, this little shot, probiotics, and it's got magnesium, it's got all the potassium, etc., that will help with it. And
if you find it, we can also.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do that. Yeah. Okay. I can't remember what it's called. It's been a while since I saw it. Okay, sorry.
Can you drink more after that?
Huh?
Can you drink more? Oh.
Yeah, you can drink more, and then also there's another thing that people take to get sober immediately that you can take, but it's very dangerous because if you do that, it's still like the liver effects are still there. So then people sometimes tend to drink more, and then they get really sick. So if you want to try it, you can. Better to recommend it because it could lead to more drinking. And then there's also this like non-alcoholic alcohol that makes you feel like you've been drinking but isn't bad for you. What's the name of that alcohol? Sentia. Yeah, which was developed by, was it David Nutt? No.
Yeah, David Nutt. He will actually be speaking at an event later this term.
So if you do want to get drunk without drinking alcohol, you could try this as well. Yes. I've tried it. You do get drunk. Yeah.
And it has no alcohol?
No alcohol,
So
no.
how does it?
How it works? I think it affects the same receptors in the brain. Sorry?
GABA receptor.
Oh yeah, it affects the GABA receptor, which I guess you could kind of hack other ways. You could use them like valerian root and like buy some GABA supplements and then like, oh, nice. Thanks. Yeah, and then have like a similar feeling. I mean, I do have quite a few recipes on like anti-anxietal and like happy supplement mixes of things you can take to like experience highs, but are kind of like not dangerous or even healthy for you. But they're not as strong as like illegal stuff, unfortunately. Yes.
Can I add something about reducing the effects of alcohol about your question? It's a supplement I discovered recently made out of some Japanese mushroom. The chemical, I think it's dihydroxymycorracin, that helps the liver break down the acetaldehyde so it doesn't accumulate in your body. So the next day you actually have almost no hangover.
Oh. Do you know?
That one, dihydroxymyceratin. You can find it on Amazon.
Yeah, this is the one. Yep. Here, pre-drinking pill containing bacteria breaks down alcohol into water and carbon dioxide. Oh. We're in Oxford, so of course this is like the most interesting thing of the talk. But yeah. Yeah, just to say there's things out there that you can do if you want to drink. Because I'm not saying don't drink, just drink responsibly. Yeah. All right. Any other?
Yes. Can you repeat thank you very much again. You mentioned that you have a hierarchy, like a list of priorities of certain tests that you could take. And you mentioned first should be the blood ones, and at the very end should be the genomic ones. Did I get it right?
The number one thing I would do is blood works. The number two would be the food sensitivities. This is specifically for like food-related biohacking, by the way. I think the genetic tests are great to do, like regardless for so many other things. But if you're trying to fix your stomach, number one, doing like a broad blood works. Ideally, if you can, within those blood works, find like your heavy metals. It won't be like super accurate, but will be somewhat accurate. And if in there you can look at your mycotoxins, like looking at, do you have mold in your body, which funnily enough you can have even if it's not in your environment, but it could be from food. Maybe you eat a lot of organic food and it just happens to be that something that you buy doesn't have preservatives, and it's like maybe a tea or maybe it's a spice that has been affecting you, and you can see that. So like really, really broad blood work. And I wouldn't spend more than about like £300 on that, but you could get away really cheap on like, really cheap I would say is around £200 if it's very broad. Then food sensitivities. Then it would be fecal test, because you can find out about like the gut microbiome that you have, like what bacteria you have, what do you have a deficiency of, very easily from that. And then finally it would be because it's the most expensive test as well, it would be your genetics. But the earlier you can do that in life, the more years you can benefit from knowing it. And what's good about doing that test is that it's kind of like forever, as opposed to the other things that are just a snapshot in time of how you're doing right now. And then you can get very custom advice for you. For example, like if you're black, you're more likely, or at least in the US, to like suffer from like hypertension, and that causes like certain things that you might not want to eat. And like if you are like, you know, some people like Asians struggle more with like alcohol oftentimes to break it down, or they might struggle with like, for example, lactose more likely, but that's just really, really broad. And if you go down to like an individual level, it's way more like personalized than just doing like wide generalization. And a lot of us are like mixed race. Like I'm mixed race, I don't look like it, but genetically I am, and that affects my digestion very much. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Cool. All right.
All right. Well, let's thank the speaker first. Yeah. Thank you. And we've got the room for another half an hour, so if you want to stick around to just chat with each other, feel free to do so. Thank you all for coming.
So nervous. Right, everyone here is like so competent and yeah. Also, people talking about peace more.
About what?
We're talking about peace, so it's a little bit more.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Was it?
Yeah, that was great.